Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. Happy New Year to you all. Happy New Year to you as well, Dave. Daniel Rowledge and Dave
all that stuff.
Forrester with you for a full week of action. There was a few games missing in the schedule, but we did get a lot of action. Some of it really exciting, some of it less so. Let's start at that end of the spectrum. On Monday, where the Leicester Riders beat the Plymouth City Patriots 106-60. There was no Connor Washington for Leicester on paternity leave and no Joe Hart. Antonio Williams, their new American, was dressed and he warmed up, but he didn't play. So I'm assuming the paperwork wasn't in place for that. Would be the only reason I could think that he wouldn't play. And this game basically went away very early. Leicester out to a 15-6 lead, then had a 21-3 run, and they were 43-18 up after 14 and a half minutes, and that was essentially the ball game.
Yeah, first thing is these weeks that start on Monday are not good. I mean, yeah, I know you like notes. I don't really like notes, but Monday seems like Monday over Christmas. It seems like about 3 weeks ago. That's the first thing. The second thing is I played my joker on this one. I didn't watch it.
Okay.
So I'm back on. You know, it's a knockout 1980s. Playing my joker double pointed. It's a knockout. It doesn't really get mentioned much anymore because of all Stuart Hall is in the same boat as Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris. BBC don't tend to repeat it that much. No. But for those who are younger, you used to be able to play a joker. And that joker was you get double points on this round if you go and you jump over a vat of milk or something. And I decided my joker was going to be I'm not watching this game.
Yeah.
And I thought I can always go back and watch it. But then
saw the score and didn't bother.
Saw the score and didn't bother. So sorry, it's because Leicester are rolling and because Plymouth are basically starting their season again.
Yeah. So I mean, I've essentially given the game there. It was all done in 15 minutes. I thought it was useful for Leicester because of the game they had coming up on Thursday. It was a chance for them to and everybody got rolling. Nelson Henry had 22-7-5. Whelan shot the ball really well for 17 points. Loving was loving. You know, everything was perfect. Everybody came out of it. Nobody got injured. Move on to Thursday, and that was the thing. And
I mean, I'll talk about this a little bit later in relation to Christmas and the specific problems and issues that it brings. But you're right, it was perfect. You could not have designed it better. And for Leicester, 3-game gap, basically a practice game before a big game, before the end of the game, while all around the league other teams aren't getting to play, and things are going wrong. And even from the practice perspective, because I don't know what the Morningside situation is, but I imagine if Rob wanted to go in on Boxing Day, he could, which is not necessarily something which is open to the vast majority of teams in the league who are in public facilities who don't open because they have to pay the staff.
I'm trying to think now. I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet with them practicing on Boxing Day. Pictures.
Yeah. Well, I might be wrong. It's not criticism, but it just means that what you tend to find that over the course of a season, you know, teams play every Friday night, every Saturday, every Sunday, and everybody gets into a rhythm and everybody's kind of got the same practice schedule and all that stuff. Over Christmas, inequalities kind of get exacerbated because venues, game schedules, etc., are different and are open. And when you throw COVID in on top of that, you know, you tend to see that there can be blowouts because the whole rest and rust thing really kicks in at Christmas. And we'll get onto that in a minute.
Let's move on to a game that I'm pretty sure you will have seen. Tuesday night, Newcastle Eagles 77, Newcastle Eagles 74, Cheshire Phoenix 77. No Corey Johnson for the Eagles, no Josh McSwiggan for the Phoenix. And Cheshire jumped out to an early lead, 18 points to 7. Now I have a running watch which is paired with my phone and it pings up notification when things was happening. I'm just wondering if the Spiral watch has notifications and whether they were pinging in the first few minutes of this game.
If Apple could introduce one, I'd probably buy it. I'm a bit of a sucker for tech. You know, Newcastle played Cheshire about 3 weeks ago and had a triple overtime game, which is probably most triple overtime games are kind of flawed. But it was a pretty imperfect triple overtime game. You know, it wasn't the best played game, and obviously you lose a triple overtime game, you're going to be ready to play in the opponent's gym in 3 weeks' time. This was a similarly flawed game. I thought Newcastle played an awful first half, horrendous. I thought Cheshire played a pretty awful second half, and probably Cheshire played a little bit better in the first half than Newcastle did in the second. But yeah, I mean, I think it was, you say 18-7, I think it was something like 8-0 or 10-0. And the thing that kind of struck you from watching it was just kind of the lack of impetus, the lack of, there was a lot of talk, a lot of communicating, a lot of talking, a lot of pointing, a lot of this, but no one was seeming to be, actually doing the things that you need to do to make plays and just to go through things. And I think Cheshire started off better. I don't think they started off great, but they started off better, and they had a game plan. The game plan was going to be that Austin was going to be guarding Fletcher off the ball, and he's going to be taking him away, and they were going to be basically Newcastle looking for a bit of inspiration elsewhere. Normally this season, when that's happened, the guy has been provided as Johnson. Johnson wasn't playing. Shelton had been dropped from the starting lineup, so Defoe was in the starting lineup. So again, that was another tweak that they'd made. Didn't really have a discernible impact, and Cheshire played a solid first half. Made some shots, but ultimately the I think the second quarter was like 12-9 or something like that. So it really wasn't great, and ultimately the overriding kind of impression of the first half was just like, are Newcastle going to start? I don't know if you watched it back. I don't know if you watched it.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've watched it. Back,
it was like, are they going to start playing? Are they going to start? Are they going to make a play, be aggressive? Just to get something, get a big crowd in there. And you're going to get your big crowd going.
It wasn't really until late in the third quarter that they. I mean, when Williams hit a couple of threes and they got it back into single figures at that point.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because to be honest, even as you say, the Malays continued into the third quarter, which is why I said I didn't think Newcastle played a great second half. They came back from 18, so you're thinking it must be a rip-roaring comeback. But in reality, it wasn't quite that. Cheshire's bench absolutely imploded in the second half. From about the 3-minute mark in the third quarter to the 8-minute mark in the fourth quarter, and that kind of allowed, it was almost like Newcastle were allowed back in by default. As you say, Williams, who was playing the 3 more than the 2, which he has been this year, I think he's probably more suited to playing the 3 because they didn't have Johnson, and Sayers got hurt. So you have Fletcher and Pearson. Williams is like the third guy, so he's the guy who's floating around and able to get open, knock down shots. He made a few shots, and also Newcastle came back with the Defoe Shelton defensive lineup, and that helped them because Cheshire, were, as I say, their third quarter was awful, and they were going with Dickerson and Ocharobia, so you got no space on the court. Both teams are walling it off, and in reality, Newcastle just made a few more shots and got a couple of shots in transition, and that really kind of almost got Newcastle over the line. Pearson made a couple of shots near the end. And then the last 2 minutes, they kind of threw away all the kind of semi-decent work that they'd done.
Just before we get to that, there was a bit early in the fourth quarter. I'm assuming you were there, and just interested to see what it looked like in real time, sort of thing, where there was a sort of altercation between Mockford and Shelton after a score. It looked like an arm had got caught in another arm, whether it was let go or not.
Well, it wasn't the great bit.
Pushed him, Mockford bumped him back, and then. The implication I saw, and I forget who it was on Twitter, was that Shelton threw a punch, and it didn't look too far away from a punch on the replay.
I saw kind of, as you say, kind of a bit of, as Shelton's turning around to go back up the court, I saw Mockford kind of grab, and I saw Shelton kind of push off and that type of stuff. I actually watched it back on the video when I got back. I saw the ref called on sportsmanlike foul.
Yeah.
Then rescind it, or I don't know if he called double unsportsmanlike.
I thought it was one either way. I thought they both got an
unsportsmanlike. I wouldn't argue with. Yeah. I wouldn't argue with a double unsportsmanlike. I wouldn't have argued with no call at all, because I did watch it back to see what had happened.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't clear on the in the arena whether they called them both or not. But no, I mean something like that. I think it's very difficult because when you get people who are kind of tangled up with each other.
Yeah,
and there's a bit of kind of shoving in one person's push off, it's another person's swinging arm. Unless you actually hit, if you make contact with somebody, you can get thrown out of the game. But if you don't, then I'm afraid who is it to attribute intent? Well, I didn't immediately think, he's got to be thrown out of the game.
Yeah, it's just interesting because he then gets 7 in a 9-2 run, and cut it to 4. The other one I wanted to pick up on, because it wasn't clear on the on the screen was the Dickerson. Dickerson goes to the basket. He might have got fouled as he went to the score, but I can only assume he said something because he got a technical, and it looked harsh without being able to hear whether he said anything. Or
well, I don't know what he said, but you know, there was a lot of jawing going on.
Yeah.
I don't think the game was actually particularly well refed. I don't think it was necessarily badly ref. I don't think it was an easy game to ref. It was chippy. There was a lot of holding going on. There was a lot of physical defense going on off the ball. You know, kind of a lot of big bodies in the paint, all of that type of stuff. Actually, Dickerson fouling out actually helped Cheshire. We'll get to that in a minute. But no, my impression was it was for just kind of, you know, one of these kind of throwaway comments towards a ref after you score when you think you were fouled.
Yeah. Which he shouldn't really do, but then I'm not sure that's worth a fifth foul. But
I'm saying I just think the whole I'll say
you don't know. The other thing is I don't know what's been going on. It might have been going on for ages.
It's the clarity of everything that goes on. But the reality is, you know, he has a you know, Shelton has a kind of a switch. I think Dickerson has a switch as well. You know, these are you know, the commentator's euphemism is emotional. The coach euphemism is slightly different at times. Their ability to control their emotions. You know,
let's go back.
Mockford in that category as well.
Let's go back to the bit you were just getting to. Person hit a couple of threes. Williams with an and one. Newcastle somehow get in front with 3 minutes to play, and you think, oh, they're going to pull this one out, having, as you say, been 18 down in the first half. And Shelton with a couple of blocks. 2 minutes out, and it's still right there.
Yeah, and I think the point I picked it back up was like in a minute and a half to go, Newcastle's up 2 and they've got the ball. You know, at that point, you know, you've got, you know, you're on a run, your energy is there, the crowd's behind them. You know, it's basketball, you know, and they come up and they go under a screen, and Fletcher short arms a 3-point shot, and Shelton gets a great rebound. Kicks it out to Williams. Williams penetrates, throws out to the foul, 17-footer, just rolls off. Okay, well, you can live with that. Come down the other end. So a minute to go, they're up 2. And then their screen and roll defense collapses. Basically, Cheshire take the ball. Interesting, Cheshire, you know, Cheshire becoming kind of almost Austin's team very quickly, because Okorafor was very limited in this game. He didn't play near the end. And Austin had the ball a lot more in his hands. Which is going to be interesting stylistically going forward, because, you know, Okorafor, to be impactful, he's either a spot-up shooter or he needs a ball in his hand. Now with the GB team, he tends to be a little bit of both, you know. So we'll see how that runs and how Cheshire run that going forward. But they put the ball in Naaman Wright's hands. Naaman Wright's been guarded by Kyle Williams. Archerobia, I think, has sets the screen, and Shelton and Williams basically don't communicate. So Shelton kind of switches onto the screen on Naaman Wright's penetration. Williams is caught on the back of Archerobia. So Archerobia is rolling to the basket. Defoe sees that. Defoe does what he has to do, which is step across to jam the cutter. But he's not guarding Dickerson anymore. He's guarding Levi Bradley. You know, so because Dickerson's not in the game, Levi Bradley's in the game. Naaman Wright knows where his shooter is. Naaman Wright throws it to him. Darius recovers out as quickly as he can.
Yeah, he did dive at him.
Bradley knocks down the shot. And that comes because of your screen and roll defense. Just when the communication just disappears. If they're going to switch, you've got to switch early, so you keep bodies between them and the basket. If you're going to chase over, you got to chase over and let Shelton recover back. But neither happened. So Defoe saw the panic going on. He stepped in, and there was a 3-point. So that blew up. Good shot by Bradley, but that blew up. And then they come down the court, and they're just in confusion. Because I watched this back as well, and you see, firstly, to start with, Williams has the ball, and kind of Fletcher goes off down the right wing. Person kind of looks at Williams like, do you want to give me the ball? Williams looks at Person, do you want to give me the ball? And kind of neither of them really kind of make a decision. So Williams brings the ball up on the court down the left wing. The whole world and his wife at this point, in particular Cheshire, and probably the best ball hawk in the league at the minute, Larry Austin, is fully aware that the ball is coming to Fletcher. You've got to get him the ball. And they end up having to throw the ball to Shelton 25 feet from the basket, which is not, or 20 feet from the basket, which is not his skill set at all. And basically trying to carry out a convoluted dribble handoff with Fletcher coming off, but Fletcher's tired because he's played the whole 40 minutes, and Austin is, as you know, we've seen it in all the games he's played. He shoots gaps.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of miscommunication between Shelton and Fletcher. And I don't put it on Shelton because I prefer Fletcher had gone and got the ball at the beginning of the offense.
In the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't put it on Shelton because he's there and he just dribbles a basketball and Austin shoots a gap and bang. And it's a 3-point game. So Cheshire have gone from being 2 points down to being 3 points up with 30 seconds to go without really having to make a play.
Yeah.
Bradley had to make the shot, but apart from that, without having to make a play, it was always on a play for them. So then Eagles call a timeout.
It was a bit more than that, just to correct you. It was 48 seconds. It was 48 seconds to go.
Yeah, my bad.
And it's 69-72 at that point.
Yeah, 3-point game. And at that point, Eagles call a timeout, and I think they advanced the ball.
They did advance the ball, yeah.
And again, this time
they almost lost it.
This time the players for they only lost it. The players a Spanish screenplay with the stack screen in the middle of the court for Person to come up, but that doesn't gain any traction. So Fletcher throws it to Kyle Williams in the corner, but Kyle Williams isn't really ready for the ball, or he isn't open enough to catch the ball either way. And he kind of catches it, then fumbles it a little bit, dribbles it in, has to dribble it out. Suddenly, the only out pass he's got is Shelton again with 3 seconds on the shot clock, 20 feet from the basket. Again, literally the least beneficial situation you could imagine if you're Newcastle. And at that point, Shelton takes 2 dribbles and it's a shot clock violation.
Yeah.
Because that's not his game. No. And so suddenly you're in a foul situation where you're 3 point. Well, you might be, you might not.
Well, this was my question because that shot clock violation is with 32.9, and I actually freeze framed it, and he just had the ball. It was a split second. He just had the ball in his hands. 32.9 seconds in a 3-point game. I just wondered whether you play defense there because you've got basically 9 seconds. If you get the stop, you can come back and you're still only 1 shot down.
Yeah,
but they obviously went foul.
I kind of there's arguments for and against, and what you don't do is foul Teddy Okorafor immediately because Teddy. I think it was Teddy who was fouled.
Yeah, it was Teddy. Yeah.
Whoever it was their best foul shooter. And that's what they fouled without really trying to trap or without trying to press or trying to get a violation. And at that point, it becomes a game that if you're Cheshire, you should never lose. My mindset would be probably that you did Cheshire advance the basketball? I can't remember.
No, they hadn't. They took it in the back. It was in the back. Yeah.
My mindset would be that you go for steal, you run jump, you try and get an 8, you use a half court line, try and get an 8-second violation, and then maybe at that point you might think with maybe 20 seconds to go, okay, we're going to hopefully get the ball into a guy, into maybe Archerobio's hands or something like that.
But you can also just play defense and hope you get and if you come up with a stop, then you've got a chance. You'll still have 9 or 10 seconds to come down and find a score, but I accept that's a gamble as well.
Well, it's a gamble as well. You do, and the other thing is you might get an offensive rebound, then kills you, or maybe Cheshire then foul you, and you're.
But then Teddy at the line kills you as well.
Of course he does. Well, Teddy at the line's not an option.
Yeah.
Whatever they did, whatever they should have done, they didn't do what they didn't do. The optimum on the optimum course of action. But Teddy, because you're making that a game. Now, in that event, I mean, if they found a more appropriate shooter, they might have still been in the basketball game because the game down and knocked down a 3, didn't he? Eventually.
Well, Shelton made first of all there was Teddy made the 2 threes with 30 seconds to go. It's a 5-point game. Fletcher missed the 3. Shelton offensive rebound got fouled, makes them both 3-point game. Teddy gets fouled straight away. 14 seconds to go. 71-76. Timeout, advanced the ball. And there was a block first. Williams went for a 3, and it was Teddy again with the block, but they managed to scramble it around to Person. But the problem with that was they'd lost too much time off the clock. By the time that went in, it was 4 seconds left. Yeah,
even a 2-point game. I just think you have to be a little bit more clue. I always thought that there was no way in the world that if you're in a fouling situation, and it might be a fouling situation, it might not be, you foul the guy the other team wants on the line.
Yeah.
I had that.
Of course, you can only foul the guy with the ball in that situation.
Yeah, but you can get the ball out of his hands in certain ways.
You need to get the ball out.
I mean, I remember that from coaching Trey Moore for 3 years. Trey Moore never missed.
Yeah.
At the end of the game, we just give Trey get the ball. Yeah, coach. Okay, go ahead. Trey got the ball, foul Trey, fantastic. And I remember thinking, this is just death. If you're going to foul them, we're going to win. I just think, no. I thought the last minute and a half from that point when they were two up with the ball, the last minute was just, they were just discombobulated, and the mistakes came one after the other. And Cheshire got away with a win that probably they didn't deserve in the second half. They got issues.
The Eagles were led by Person 20, Williams 18, Shelton 15 and 15, Fletcher 15 assists, Austin 19, Dickerson 14, Teddy had 13. Newcastle sub 500 at the new year for the first time in a league structure since 1995, which was the first year in Newcastle.
The Comets, that would have been.
Yeah, it would have been the Comets.
Great kit. Great kit, kind of white and sparkly stars. So John Hall came in and made them the Eagles, which is a bit more generic and corporate for my liking. I preferred the Comets. The Comets also had a good ring to it because it was kind of fitted with the second syllable of Newcastle. So Castle Comet, you just anyway.
Wasn't it something to do with the logo as well of the venue?
The Millennium Bridge, I think. It might be the Millennium
Red Hugh Bridge, isn't it? Next door to the arena.
That's right.
Anyway, enough of bridges in Newcastle. Let's move on to Thursday and the Northwest Derby. Manchester 80, Cheshire Phoenix 76. Another close defeat for the Knicks. No Hudson and Saunders out with COVID. There was no Martavius McKnight, and we later found out that he has since left the Manchester Giants. But Ulf was back. He didn't play, David Ulf, but he was back in the lineup. And still no Mick Swigan for the Knicks. So Artisan, with McKnight not there, into the starting lineup. That was the first time they'd changed their starting five in 8 league games this season. And Giants scored the first 8 points, but then Knicks got going 15 of the next 18 and took a lead. And it kind of stayed around that sort of mark for much of the first half.
Yeah, I mean, the McKnight thing's really interesting, not in relation to the fact that players go home, because players go home, it happens, but they haven't got another one, really. McKnight was a unique player on their team because he was a bona fide threat from anywhere on the court at any point, and you could give him the basketball. And he also allowed them to play quite small, because if their starting line would always start with Jamel Anderson at the 4 and Dan Clark at the 5, and then the 3 guards, generally Armstrong, Steele, and McKnight. By inserting Artisan, which I think is probably the only thing he could realistically do at this point without another player, could maybe inserted Saunders, but he's been effective off the bench. You then go big, and Jamel now plays the 3, and that changes a lot about the team. It changes a lot about your spacing. It really impacts the game, and it means that the games that we've been talking about with Manchester being like 100 to 95. Those games suddenly become 80 to 75, and it's not a coincidence that this game ended up something similar. Indeed, tonight's game did as well, because they're physically more strong. They're a physically stronger team. They're a better rebounding team, but they give up all the spacing and the fast breaking and the shot making that they get from McKnight. So that's just kind of going forward, and that's going to be relevant going into the Cup Final in 4 weeks' time. We'll get to that in a minute. Where they're going to have to bring another American in the next couple of weeks, I assume, and to see what type of guy they bring in.
Unless they've changed the rules, as long as you've registered him 14 days before the final, they'll be able to. So that gives them to the 16th of January to register.
Cheshire came in with the benefit of having played, and again in this game, Austin's taking up a more and more significant impact on this team. For, I think, generally for good, albeit they still have these issues, as I've said, with the various big guys playing together. Manchester had beaten Cheshire 5 times. This was number 6. That's a lot of games. I mean, that's Worcester and Plymouth from last year.
Yeah.
And that's where you've got over that kind of, it's hard to beat a good team 3 times, to the point whereby you've got the hex over a team.
Yeah.
Well, how are we ever going to beat these guys? And the kind of the game was probably a little bit less fluent, but a little bit more chippy than previous games have been. And I didn't know who was going to win, to be honest. Virtually all the way probably until middle of the fourth quarter. You didn't really see, any particular differentiation.
Well, the key bit, it was close most of the way through. Nick's probably shaded most. If you look on the time in the lead, they were probably ahead for more of it. But then start of the fourth quarter, Dan Clark hit 2 3-pointers. That put them 5 points up, and I suppose that's the point where you go, oh no, here we go again, sort of thing, when you've lost 5 times. And then actually they stretched that out. Clark hit another 3, and they had a 16-2 start to the fourth quarter to lead 72-61 with 4:50 to go.
Yeah, and they kind of, Manchester have the one thing that Manchester have, which is helped them all the way through the beginning of the year, is they have the Armstrong-Clark kind of connection, which is high level BBL, kind of championship level BBL connection in relation to the ability of Armstrong to get to the rim and the ability of Clark to space the floor and punish teams if you don't guard either way. And you've got to give something up either way. And then they have the shooters on the weak side if the ball gets rotated. So, it was even in the game tonight, Jason Swin's talking about, how they need to go back to the Armstrong-Clark kind of action. And he's absolutely right. It's probably, take away, Crandall, Nelson Henry or Crandall Walker, whoever, probably the next best, or maybe even more dominant, dangerous, must stop it type of action in the whole league if you're going to have any chance to win. And, and the thing with Clark is that, players forget, even if he hasn't made a shot in 3 quarters, players forget how good he is. Players forget he didn't make shots and he's making 3s instead of 2s. So I think that did open the game. I think he might have been guarded by Bacali at the time. I think Bacali might have been in the game because of foul trouble. And I think Bacali struggled to guard Clark, obviously, because Bacali's basically 7 foot and isn't used to having to chase out there. And that's the advantage that you have of having Clark at the 5 and the ability that Manchester have to maximise that. And then Cheshire didn't quit, to be fair. I
don't know if I've imagined it, but I'm starting to wonder whether Manchester do this all the time. They sort of get up about 8, 9, 10 points 5 minutes ago, and you think, oh, they've won this. And then they give most of it back. Now, more often than not, they stay up and win the game. But it just seems to, I don't know, maybe I've imagined it, but it feels like it's happened a few times.
It's happened, I think, against Glasgow on a couple of occasions, certainly. And part of that is being slightly young. You've got a young point guard, young backup point, young inexperienced point guard in Armstrong, inexperienced 2 guards in relatively inexperienced 2 guards in Whelan and Steele. They haven't proved that they can win yet. I think they're going to in due course, but they haven't. And it's all about decision making at that type of the game. Where's the ball going at the right time? And certainly they can get sloppy in relation to their entries into offense. They get runouts on them when they're in the lead. The second thing is, that's always going to happen a little bit when you're playing 190 games, 195 games. You're going to be up 10, but that doesn't mean much. So that because they are literally partaking in games of runs on virtually every occasion that they're playing up until now, certainly with McKnight in the game. It probably becomes a slightly lesser factor. But no, you don't ever feel like that they've put a game away. I agree. Not until it's about 35 plus and you've got your money safely cashed out.
But so Ocherobia, Austin closed the gap, and then Wright had an and 1 with 52 seconds to go, and it's a 1 point game, 75, 74, and then we talked about Armstrong and the different ways that he can score. I thought the little runner that he got with 46 seconds to go was way too much time and space, to be honest with you.
And I could, if you'd seen me at my computer, it was kind of you can't give that up, because you could see it was coming. And he was almost unmolested, unharassed in relation to it. It was a straight line. It was almost like a practice shot. And unfortunately, that's a tough shot, but it's a tough shot he's proved he can make. And you have to be at that time in the game, particularly any time in the game, but particularly at the end of the game, you can't turn around and say, oh, he made a tough shot. If it's a shot he's made regularly. Tough shot. There are tough shots for certain players, and it's all about who shoots the ball and who shoots the ball from where. And I agree with you, actually. Thinking back to however many days ago it was now, and the time watching it, thinking that's just too easy, because there was no ball movement, there's no help, and I think he made the next play down as well, but I can't remember what happened in between.
Well, no, actually, what happened coming back the other way is Austin missed a 3, which I didn't think was the best option that they could come up with 19 seconds to go. And then they forgot to foul. It was a 3-point game. They forgot to foul, and Manchester just passed, and Anderson dunked it.
Yes, Anderson dunked it, and that was basically the basketball game. Yeah, that's right. And again, mental mistakes at the end of the game. I agree with you on the Austin shot. Austin's, the one thing Austin hasn't shown is an ability as of yet to be a knockdown shooter, and that's when I say that he's kind of becoming a more dominant factor in that team. That's kind of what I mean. I don't think he'd have shot that shot 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that's going to be an interesting thing for Cheshire to manage, because he strikes me as if Teddy's a pure point guard, he strikes me as more of a combo guard, effective, absolutely devastating going to the rim, exceptional in transition, a bit of a ball hawk defensively. But is he the guy who, when you've got the GB point guard there, is he the guy you're going to put the ball in his hands at the end of the game to make the right decisions? That's going to be their next decision going forward. Because as I say, they won a close game at Newcastle, but they didn't really win it. Newcastle lost it. My view, that team still needs to unlock Naaman Wright. I don't think they've unlocked him at all at this point. I'm not sure he's playing now. He's kind of playing the 3, started out playing the 2. I'm not quite sure how they do that. He's a bit up and down, but he has one of the silkiest offensive games in the league. He could comfortably be a 20-point scorer in this league, and they haven't quite got a hierarchy there yet, which has him at or near the top, which I think it would be if I was looking at it from afar. So
Clark with 22.7 rebounds, 8 for 16 shooting, 4 of 8 from 3. Armstrong 16, 5 and 9. Wright led them with 17 and 8. Ocharobia 8 of 10 shooting for 16 points, 8 rebounds, 16 and 6 for Austin. So let's move on to the Cup semi-final second leg at the Morningside Arena, where the Leicester Riders won 79-74 to give themselves an aggregate victory of 178-170 and a place in the final against the Giants. There was no Washington for Leicester, no Tawia for the Lions. Jordan Spencer was back. Jordan Williams was playing, but you could see he wasn't quite right, and actually didn't play in the second half. I think he played 11 minutes in total. And Leicester came out, Whelan, Walker, then a Loving 3. They've opened up a 13-6 lead, and they're 10 points up on aggregate almost straight away.
Yeah, I was a little bit. I kind of built myself. I was a little bit disappointed with, unfortunately, kind of the run up to this game from kind of a neutral's viewpoint. With London not having played for 20 days, with Washington not being there, with some of the London guys looking like they're a little bit, as you say, hurt. Reece looked like he was hurt, and Williams looked like he was hurt as well. Because I was hoping that we'd get a real kind of the first defining point of the season in this game, and I don't think we quite did, because I think there was still a number of things left kind of unanswered at the end of the game. We'll get to that in a minute. But in relation to it, Leicester came out like a team who were utterly focused on that, and I think they have been focused on it. I think they've been focused on it for a long time. When you listen to what's coming out of the club, and they haven't been in the final for 5 or 6 years, haven't won it for 7 or 8 years. So I think and you can't win all 4 unless you win 1. And Leicester and London, have to be looking at winning all 4. Leicester because it's the only thing basically they haven't done. London because it's the only thing that's commensurate with the resources that they have. So you got to win the first one to do that. But I think but obviously London's focus has been slightly different because of Europe, because of COVID, because of the fact that they've got a lot of rookie players who probably don't, in fact, I'll say probably, who definitively don't understand what it is to be in a cup final. You can't teach. Jordan Williams knows, some of the other guys, Will Neighbour will know, but to Isaiah Reese or to Kyra Kelly or whatever, they don't know, right? And the advantage that kind of Leicester have on that is that this is Gino's second go around. Gino saw what Gino has an idea. When players have seen, and I say Gino, but Darian Nelson-Henry's his third go around. Mo Walker's been around for a long time. Okay, Zach Jackson, his second go around. That allows you to have that collective sense of purpose because you know what's coming and you know what you're aiming for and you understand the significance of it. I don't think London necessarily did entirely understand the significance of it. So yeah, so they started off and basically London missing shots as I would have expected them to, having had 3 weeks off. Leicester being in a nice rhythm, you know, they've really got Walker going with Nelson. It's a crazy thing to say, but the Nelson Henry injury has been the best thing that could have happened to them, because it has got everybody else on that team flying. And Nelson Henry is not the type of guy, or not the type of player who's going to cause any eruptions when he comes back in, because he's going to come back in and do his job. So he's not going to knock anybody else off their perch when they come back in. So you lose a guy, you manage to demonstrate that you can play without him, but he's the type of guy who, when he comes back in, he's only going to add. He's not going to take off anybody else. Now, that said, they also benefited in this game from not having Washington. It sounds crazy because Connor's so good, but that meant that Mackenzie's role was far more stabilised in this team. He was going to play, and he came out and played great. And the game was ultimately won, and I'll get to this in a minute, but the game was ultimately won with the difference between London's bench and Leicester's bench. Even though Leicester were up 18 in the first half, you look at the stats at the end of the basketball game, the bench has made the massive difference, and that's Nelson Henry, Adekoya, and Mackenzie. And Mackenzie was freed up because Washington wasn't there, so he wasn't sharing minutes. That's the reality of it, because Rob doesn't want to take Gino off, and I understand that. So there's not that many minutes to go around unless you're going to play the three guards together, which is tough against London. So that said, the game there were a couple of things in the game, which in the early part of the game, which was interesting. Firstly, Kelly got an awful first foul call. I mean, that frustrated me. At the beginning of the game, I actually did put a tweet out right at the beginning of the game, saying I was surprised that he had the EuroLeague ref in Manchester and the relative newbies in Leicester. I don't think they did a bad job reffing the game. I'm not saying that, but I was surprised at that. And I thought Kelly's first foul call was a horrible late. He's just a 7-foot guy who blocked a shot. But then he committed a second foul soon afterwards. That becomes extremely impactful because London are short of centres. They haven't got Jordan Williams isn't healthy. Towie is not there, and they end up having to play 7 minutes of the first quarter with Will Neighbour as the centre. And Will Neighbour has hardly played. He hardly played before the 20 days off, let alone that. And Will Neighbour is 0-5. Okay, and so at this point, Leicester are going to come out hard. They're going to come out fast. They're going to score. You need to match them early, and they got some good shots, but they weren't knocking them down through rhythm, through lack of playing, whatever. Then I thought it's my hobby horse this season, I'm afraid. Kelly never came back in until 4 minutes to go in the second quarter, and I thought he kept him out far too long. I appreciate it's kind of everything is dependent on who the player is. So every different players have different characteristics. Flanoy had 4 fouls in the first 5 minutes. He was still playing. Whatever. But it's up to coaches to know their players, and I get all of that. But I'm looking at that. You haven't got to wire. Williams is hurt. Your neighbour is struggling, and you're in a win or die game. You got to get that guy back on the court earlier. And I thought that by waiting until it's kind of a 4-minute mark in the second quarter, he kind of hasn't got enough time to get into the game at the end of the second quarter, so he's still fighting for rhythm. He hasn't got his partner in crime, Reece, throwing lobs for him to any real degree, because Reece, was a bit flaky in this game. And they've lost out on any rim protection that they would otherwise have had from him. And ultimately, at the end of the game, you see he has 5 points and 3 rebounds. And you think, well, can London win that basketball game by 4 points if Kelly has 5 points and 3 rebounds? The answer is probably no.
No.
And it took him out for long. So that plan to keep him out for as long as they didn't work. Then I thought the game, the tie was actually won at the end of the second quarter, the last 5 minutes of the second quarter, because London kind of folded. Spencer came out. I couldn't figure out why Spencer came in ahead of Lockhart. Spencer's hardly played. I thought Spencer looked totally away from where he's been in the past. He was uncomfortable on the court. The passes were late.
I'm trying to think. He had that ankle injury in the TV game. Is that the first or second TV game? Second TV game of the year. So it was a long time ago. It would have been early October.
He played 4.5 minutes at the end of the second quarter, and they were -10 in that period of time. So they went from 8 to 18 in that time. And I just didn't get it because Lockhart had played well in the first leg when he came in the third quarter, and he'd helped them stabilize the team. So Vince went with Spencer, and I thought that was that really facilitated their decline. On top of that, I'm slightly concerned about Robinson, because I don't know if he has, it may be COVID, it might be injury. I'm not privy to any of that, but he had no separation in this game. his quickness, which has been kind of otherworldly in BBL terms over the past 3 or 4 years. Justin's been able to get to wherever Justin wanted to get and get the shot he wanted to get. That's just been non-negotiable. And it wasn't there. He made one basket in the whole game, and it was a tough kind of Euro step where he couldn't shed Mackenzie. He complained he was fouled. And I was waiting for him to kind of step up when Reece went through his kind of mental foibles, and he didn't. So at half time, you would say everything was, was done and dusted. But the second half was what made it intriguing, because the second half kind of leads on as a portent of what's to come of the rest of the season. And firstly, sorry, is anything else about the first half?
No. I mean, you covered it really. Leicester just dominated that first half. Got up 18. I thought it's interesting because you were talking about rust on Twitter, and one of the things I thought is that I kind of go with that at the offensive end, but that doesn't mean you can't play defense. And I just thought they didn't play any defense in the first half, and then they came out in the third quarter and played defense. I
tend to agree with that, albeit I think Leicester are so good at the moment that I thought Washburn's on-ball defense on Crandall was good the whole game. I was going to come to that. I thought the rest of them in the first half, particularly without Kelly's rim protection for however long he was out the game, for the rest of their defense, Crandall struggled to score in this game. He was 2 of 11, but he was able to throw the ball around and get other people's shots. And that's not because of the way Washburn's guarding him. That's not Washburn's fault. That's everybody else's fault. Yeah? So if these guys are getting open looks, or Walker's getting at the rim, or Nelson Henry, or whatever, or Jackson's getting to go where he wants, or Loving's getting threes in transition, and Crandall's just feeding the ball, that's the other guys. And I thought Leicester are so good at finding open shots that if you're out of sync, and there were times in that first half that there was 5 guys playing for London who haven't been on court together this season. And I don't think it was necessarily a question of how hard they were playing. I just think they got filleted. And you're going to get filleted by a team who's playing at such a high level offensively, and they're playing at incredibly high level offensively, Leicester, and is making shots, and is in their own gym, and has scored 106 3 days beforehand, and is totally focused in on this game, and has been for the past 3 weeks, and all those things. That's going to happen, and so the rust is kind of the mental thing as well as the physical thing. It's where you go. So all those things kind of kick in, but in the second, I agree, in the third quarter, and they dialed it up a little bit. I thought Washburn was excellent in this game. He didn't make a shot in the first half, but I thought his defense on Crandall was a real portent of the way to go, because he held Crandall at 2 of 11. I say he did.
2 of 10.
2 of 10. Sorry. One of the two was a shot that Crandall made on Spencer. He made a 3 in front of the bench, and he changes the game for them. If you look at ultimately, we look at this basketball game. He played 31 minutes, and London won by 5. The 8 minutes he didn't play, London lost by 10. Now that's obviously a shaky start. It's a single game plus minus, but it's an eye test stat as well. It's right on board my eye test as well. And I thought they took from him, and they had Kelly in the back line as well, obviously, and they became a lot more aggressive defensively. And also, I think Leicester they weren't comfortable, but they got knocked out of rhythm a little bit, and they went in London, got it all the way back to, I think, a 4-point game in
61-57 in the game with 2 minutes to go, and then last
point, 6 points.
They've got that's the point, and the next 6 points were Jackson, Adekoya, Crandall in 50 seconds, and suddenly it's back to 10.
As soon as Jackson made that shot, I did the timeout sign. As soon as he made the first one, because you want to save your timeouts for the end. I get that. But when you've put in so much effort to get the game back, you've built, it's almost like you're climbing a mountain, yeah? And you've got a foothold 3/4 of the way up, or whatever base camp or whatever, I don't know. You've got 3/4 of the way up, but you just want to stop. You just want to gather, bank your winnings, stop, get your feet, and then go again. And there's only a minute and a half to go. And that minute and a half was a dangerous minute and a half. And you could just see it. You could see London were looking a little bit tired on the court. And they didn't call that timeout. It went to a 10-point game. I think that minute and a half actually won Leicester the whole thing. Because if that's still a 13-point total game in real terms. And if that goes in at 6 or 7 points, it's at the end of the quarter. then that's a totally different mindset in the fourth quarter. Leicester scored 26 points in the second half. They struggled to put the ball in the basket. And it wasn't because they were missing open shots. It was because London were playing better defense, and London were being what they could be.
It was actually 27 because they scored 26 in the first quarter, 26 in the second quarter, and then 27 in the second half. And early in the fourth, Adekoya hits a three, Jackson hits a jump shot. It's out to 14, and you think, oh, it's definitely done. But they came again, London, with Washburn and Williams hitting threes, an 11-2 run, got it down to 5 with 4:25 to go, but it never quite looked like they were going to get enough with that. Those 3 points, it's funny, we say 3 points is nothing, it's one shot, blah, blah, blah.
Massive.
But actually, it just kept London far enough away that it didn't look like they were going to make it.
Well, 4 minutes ago, what flashed through my mind was those 2 ridiculous points they gave away at the end of the first. They gave away 2 ridiculous points when they were fouling because they didn't understand the competition that they were playing. And that was about 5 minutes ago in the game. I actually took 2 points off them and thought, oh my God, this would be a different game. This is a details type of situation. From Leicester's perspective, it was interesting when it all clammed up. Mo Walker didn't get back on the court after 3 minutes to go in the 3 minutes gone in the third quarter. Adekoya finished the game at the 5 for his pick and roll defense and for his quickness. And he was great. Him, McKenzie, and Nelson Henry to a lesser extent were the guys that basically determined this game in their favour. And you're right, it never quite got back to the point whereby they could make enough shots. Even when Reece is through on his own and his layup rolls out and then he misses a foul shot, and a 3-point play becomes a 1-point play. There's a couple of times I thought Reece was about to crack. He walked over to a referee very menacingly at one point with a basketball in his hand.
He did, because that was right in front of me, and I'm thinking, gosh, he's gone right up to the line. He stomped on the line a few times, and then he just managed to back away in time.
Yeah, and you just kind of, you never know. It's kind of one of those antennae moments, you watched enough BBL over the years, you're looking for this type of stuff, and he just didn't quite get there. And, they didn't ultimately have quite enough. It's hard because they're missing a number of guys. But as I say, I was surprised Lockhart didn't get on the court. They didn't get anything from Robinson. They got a little bit from Neighbour. But I think they also now know that, if it was, if this was a hot take show and you were doing platitudes, you would say Leicester are more together, more utterly kind of single-mindedly focused on what they were doing in relation to getting to that final. But then again, that's that doesn't mean you can't win. So I think I always think that's simplistic. So I'm going to go down there. But they did give off that environment, that mentality of being slightly more kind of locked in, to use that ubiquitous basketball phrase, than London were. And I think that and London played hard second half. Reece played. I'm giving Reece some stick here, but he played hard. He tried. He gave it everything. Dirk Williams, Eugenie, these guys are real players, and Washburn stuck at it all the way.
My thing on it is, you watch the 80 minutes and you take the scoreboard off. Who won? Take the scoreboard. You don't know what the score is. You just watched 80 minutes of basketball. Who won? Leicester won. So they were the better team over the course of both games. So
I think that's right.
And 8 points, 10 points, 12 points.
It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. The interesting, I'm trying to project forwards a little bit here. And the interesting thing is, were Leicester closer to their peak than London, or closer to their ceiling than London after theirs?
Well, I think the way Leicester have played in recent games, I'd be really amazed if they can go much further up from where they are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But what we don't know is how much further up can London get with the pieces.
We don't, and if we look around the rest of the league, the reality is we have to say that maybe outside of Manchester, if they bring in a real a stud kind of scorer for McKnight, you're looking around, you're thinking, who else is going to challenge Leicester on the way that Leicester are playing at the moment? You don't see Sheffield, Cheshire, Newcastle, Bristol. I mean, they've got to go to Bristol in the trophy. I think, but then Bristol haven't played a game for 3 weeks either, or not a game that matters. Obviously we missed the one that doesn't matter. So
we do enough games to do games that don't count.
Yeah, exactly.
Although well done to Plymouth.
The social media for that was quite interesting.
That was good for Plymouth. It was one of those. I know that everybody was going mad about whether it should be played or not. They sold a bunch of tickets. It's a brand new business. It needs the money. So I put out, play the game. Nobody gets hurt. Home team wins. What I didn't put was overtime. If I should have put that for the perfect tick. So
amen.
So well done.
Amen to that. For once, I entirely agree. We have to stop this.
Let's hope they can use, and also they got Williams to play as well. Let's put a bow on this one now, because we've done a lot on this. So Jackson 15 and 6, Whelan 14. I mean, this is the thing with Leicester, is it's just good numbers across the board. Reese 20 points, 5 and 7. Dirk 2 of 7 from 3 for 14 points. Lyons were 8 of 29 from 3-point range. First cup final for Leicester since 2016, and of course it sets up the Whelan derby in the cup final, which will be interesting. In the
we do a review of that cup final of 2015-16 before the next one.
I can't remember it now. What happened? No, we're not getting into that.
I have a vague memory.
I'm sure you do.
A picture on my wall as well.
Put it there behind you. Put it there behind you.
We'll not mention that. I might do actually. We'll not mention the 13-14 one. No. Just less familiar.
Let's stick with the Lions and go to Saturday, New Year's Day. And if it's a New Year's Day, it means Scorchers are going to win. Surrey Scorchers 78, London Lions 77. No Davis and Jameson for the Scorchers. Tawia was obviously still injured. Williams was also, Jordan Williams was also out. I didn't see Isaiah Reese when I was looking. Washburn and Spencer appeared to be running the layup lines,
yes.
but didn't play. So the Lions ended up with only 6 players, which is amazing when we spend all this time.
Ward Hibbert was there as well, actually, but that might have just been the camera angle. It might have been Spencer I was looking at. Interesting. I mean, speculate. I have no clue.
Yeah. It seems odd if you're running the layup lines that they're not playing. And also the other thing I always find weird is how you end up with only 6 players when you've got a tie up with Barking, and it's New Year's Day. I'm assuming Barking weren't playing. That you must.
That is a particularly interesting thing, because the suggestion is that you've got 8 players, isn't it? You've got Washburn and Spencer.
Well,
so you don't need Barking. Yeah. But they didn't play, but they did lineups. So there's it's a BBL, it's Christmas, it's New Year's Day. God knows, there could be 100 stories. There could be 100 reasons. Most, probably about 65 of them would be libelous. So I'm not going to.
So let's move on to the game. And
speculation other than raising our eyebrows up about
This was Full Metal Jacket. They were just firing up threes all over the place in the first half. It was.
I mean, I'd like to say it was a well-played game.
It was like an all-star game. Just three.
Well, I mean, there were a couple of things about this game. One, they're going to have to turn Kyler Kelly around, because I don't know what's going on with him. In this game, this game was made for him, and there's only 6 players. Yeah, Vince could hardly have him in the game at various points. There's one game play right near the end where he could literally caught the ball in the basket and threw it up for a half court violation. And so, rather than just kind of dealing with, as you say, the game itself, which is you shoot, I shoot, you shoot, I shoot, you shoot, I shoot. Kaelin, you shoot, Kaelin, shoot another one, Kaelin, shoot another one, Kaelin. All that stuff, which, to be honest, would bore me to tears to talk about. The kind of the fascination was 2 things. One, that Surrey played hard and played harder than London. That I'm happy for Surrey that they got that win. I just hope that they were able to move on from it as well. But obviously, ultimately Surrey are competing for 8th at this point in the season. London are competing for 1st. There's not many teams competing for 1st at the moment. It's Leicester. You don't really think Manchester are competing for 1st, so they've only got 3 losses, but not really. So it's London, and you can't lose games. You can't just drop games here and now at this part of the season.
Well, the thing I looked at it is actually on New Year's Day you've lost 2 games to teams with 5 defeats. Yeah. I know one of them says Newcastle Eagles on the front, but they still have, at the time, 5 defeats.
5 defeats, yeah. And the four only played 4 league games, or 6 league games. In the 4-2. And, last year, if you remember, they won the last 11 league games last year.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And they dropped it by a game. So they need to be winning this game. And why Washburn in particular wasn't on, because Washburn, if they have Washburn, they win that game. I've got absolutely no doubt in my mind that they win that game, just because of all the extra intangible stuff. Because London ended up in that game basically, as you say, 5 out, dancing around the perimeter, with whoever caught the ball, trying to find ever more intricate ways for Cagini to get a 3-up, because he was or Williams to get a 3-up. They had Lockhart, Robinson, Cagini, Williams, and the other one, God, who was it? Neighbour, the other shooter, Neighbour, sorry. 5 guys who basically, apart from Will Neighbour going inside a couple of times and making a couple of turnaround jump shots, 5 guys were basically driven around the perimeter. And as I say, ordinarily that would be tough to guard, but Justin Robinson wasn't able to get to the rim. Andre, and in fact, at the end of the game, it was Justin Robinson who was throwing the ball in bounds.
Well, this is the thing. Let's forward. I mean, there were 41 3-point attempts in the first half, which is mind-blowing.
And it's a bad camera angle as well to watch 3-point attempts, because you're looking down on the court. It's not great.
But down the stretch, it was Neighbour and it was Lockhart who were getting them back into the game, and then
the Lockhart who wasn't on the court on Thursday,
and then minute 50 to go, Teo absolutely hammered it down. That was unbelievable dunk over Kyler Kelly.
It was, but I thought credit to Teo's great play. I thought Kelly was late. I don't think Kelly was in that. I don't think Kelly's head was in that game at all. I think it was head being in that game. He'd have blocked that shot, but it wasn't that he didn't try. Just his feet didn't move. He was stuck in New Year's cement, and it was great. Yeah, it was kind of one of those moments where your eyes, whoa, what happened there? Great, but it was indicative of the kind of the. It's one of those plays that you haven't seen enough of from Surrey, which is like, we're not going to lose. It's one of those plays with the intent. It's worth 2 points, same as all the other players, but it has the intent of more.
Particularly, they play on a New Year's Day because they always get a full house, and it was full house, and it'd be raucous, and
you're dunking over a 7-footer with 2 minutes to go, and you're making, and that's sending a message. It's a message sending play, and so I'm glad that they managed it that way. And I think Lockhart then made a shot, didn't he? He made a tough shot.
Well, first of all, Cagini misses a 3. Jules Zangakoda drives. Kelly did challenge that pretty well. It went out of bounds. Lions ball. Yeah. Then they come down the other end. Lockhart, he was in the horns and he went left, and then he drove into the key and he shot over Kalen. And it was a nice shot. Minute and 10 to go, and it's Lions were up 76-77 at that point. And then they came down the other end, and Neighbour was sort of overplaying Teo, and he just sliced down the lane back door, and it was a good pass. And a nice
that's right. I remember thinking, you can't give that up. You just can't give the back door up at that point in the game. You've got to play solid, keep them in front of you, make a play. And at that point, to be fair, Surrey, their defense eventually, I say eventually, but generally throughout most of the game, recognized what London were. And now London didn't have a plan B because they had no level of interior presence at all. But Surrey were much better at pressing up on the shooters, particularly in the second half, at taking away the looks for Cagini, taking away kind of switching on screens and that type of thing, taking away looks for Williams. And I thought the defense held up for once at the end of the game.
Well, the last couple of plays, Robinson from the baseline with a sort of 12-footer that just rimmed out on him.
Yeah.
That's 39 seconds to go. Obviously, Surrey run the clock. Teo flushed off the 3-point line, took a long 2, that comes out, and then it's a bit of a melee for the ball because Dirk.
They've got the offensive rebound. They got defensive rebounding through it, and then
Dirk
even that wasn't smooth.
Everybody
when they look at that, they had the arrow.
Yeah. So they had the possession arrow with 5.9 seconds to go. Timeout, advanced the ball. And Surrey still had a foul to give at that point, which they didn't choose to do. But I just didn't think that was... They ended up with Cagini sort of fall away from 14 feet, 15 feet. I didn't really think that was the best.
It was a 3 out of 10, wasn't it? I mean, it was a 3 out of 10. If you're looking at kind of 10 being the best shot you could get, and the one being the worst, it was maybe a 3 out of 4, probably maybe a 4 because it's Kajini, because he can make tough shots, but he generally makes them from the 3-point line. No, what struck me about that was 2 things. One, Robinson started off throwing the basketball in bounds, which means that he's basically not going to be or unlikely to be a part of the play. I mean, it's very rare that once you throw the ball in bounds in a kind of a less than a 10-second situation, you ever get the ball back. You know, he's your two-time MVP, and he's taking the ball out of bounds to throw a fairly straightforward pass in. So, you know, so you're basically saying you would prefer to have the ball in Lockhart's hand than Robinson's hands, which makes me concerned about his health, to be honest. The second thing is, it was a very, second thing is, it begins with D, it ends with K, I mean, look, he's playing out of his skin. I mean, they didn't even try and get the ball to Dirk. I would have Dirk shoot a 30-foot shot to win the game and live with that, the way he's been playing. But it wasn't that Surrey ran them off or Surrey broke up in action. It was basically just a baseline cut for Kajini to catch the basketball and go on their ends, or you shoot, and then we'll walk out the gym, we'll win if we win, we lose if we lose. And, that's going to hurt them. It's really going to hurt them. And it's going to hurt, if they are serious about, they're not going to win the cup now. If they're serious about the league, then that's one of their 3 strikes. You get 3 strikes. I don't think the Newcastle game was a strike because that was early this season, and it was a losable game. But that is one of their 3 strikes. Sometimes you don't even get 3, but that is one of them. And now they're at the point whereby they have to beat Leicester 2 out of 3, maybe even 3 out of 3. Yeah. And that sounds like that sounds like projection, because you think, it's January. They've only played 6 games. How can you talk like this? They've got 20 more games to play. 5, right. Leicester are about 9-0, 8-0, 9-0. Leicester got 19.
8-0, yeah.
8-0. So Leicester got 19 games to play. At this point in time, you wouldn't see them losing maybe more than 2 games to teams other than London. Right? They're out of strikes. They're really struggling. So, and this comes on, how much do the London Lions focus on picking up the league title in April? How much are they focused on it? I'm not sure they are. Certainly not to the degree that Leicester are. No. And then watch this space for Washburn and Spencer, because I have no clue. I have no clue, but it don't seem right. And we have to remember that London season last year was basically torpedoed by Liggins not playing in a game against Worcester, which they would have otherwise they should have won by 20.
Before Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah, he wasn't playing, and because I think he got himself thrown out in a game at Newcastle on the Friday night, and there must have been words, and whatever reason he was either benched or he refused to play. So there's history in this with this club, and ultimately a game which cost them the league title. So there's history with this club about this, and they have to. Maybe it's a bright light to London, maybe it's New Year's Eve, maybe it's nothing, and maybe we're just speculating over nonsense.
Yeah, but, maybe they've got back problems.
Yeah. I can't, but just it's certainly I think as opposed to a spiral watch, we'll call it a drama watch. We'll put them on a drama watch. Yeah. And they haven't got Kevin Ware tweeting about stuff, so it's not as much fun.
Yeah, no, we can't get the insight. So, Calum Raftopoulos with 20 points, 7 of 10 shooting. That is his career high in the BBL. He did have 25 for Solent against Hemel in 2017. 21 is also his best efficiency in the BBL as well. Teo with 19 points. Kajini, 23 and 7, 8 of 20. Neighbour had 18 and 7. Dirk was 7 of 21 for 16. So they're now 11 and 1 on New Year's Day. The Scorchers and Lions are now 1 and 3 because they've played them 4 times.
That's it. I should say, we talk about rest and rust and all that stuff. Have to be consistent here. So we haven't played a game for a while.
Yeah.
They came out and they made shots. I think they're getting to their gym quite regularly. I think, which helps them.
And fair play to London because actually they weren't scheduled to play this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely, I agree with that as well, because Bristol pulled out. And again, this is a tough time for the league, and this is a thing with Plymouth, Bristol going to Plymouth and London going to Surrey. I have no, I think we should all applaud that. We should just put everything else to one side and say, look, we need to support the economy of the sport. We need to support the economy of the game. We need to get these games played, and we need more. We need to actually just moving forward on this. The whole league needs to have a very careful look at the structure of what it does at Christmas, because it is clearly a boom time. Gyms are being filled, even in COVID. The fans are piling in, and we need to find a way of exploiting.
And the challenge for clubs is, can you get the venue A, and then can you get the training facilities B?
It is, but what I will say about that is that, you know, the more people who are going to come in, the more likely you're going to be able to get a venue over. If you're getting 800 people to come to a game on a normal night and you're going to get 1,500 to come on Christmas, then maybe you can pay a bit extra, time and a half to get other people in there. And it's always been, you know, we've always had to be very careful about controlling expenses with clubs in this country, because you can't afford gyms that aren't full. But as I say, you know, Christmas is at this point in time underutilized by the league. You know, we've seen it this year. Leicester's had 2 home games. Newcastle's had 1 home game almost full. Manchester have their biggest crowd ever. Plymouth, 1,000 seats. You know, we've got to do a better job of getting all these games played at times when people are going to be there. And that generally means, if you promote it properly, the school holidays. You know, that generally means that.
Well, let's move to another game that sold all the tickets. Sheffield Sharks 62, Leicester Riders 100. No Joe Mavzulo and no Oscar Baldwin due to COVID for the Sharks. Their new signing, Devontae Williams, has not joined the club yet. Still no Connor Washington for Leicester. Leicester made 8 of their first 9 shots. They were 19-9 up after 4.5 minutes. And you were like,
here we go again.
Here we go again, yeah.
Here we go again. They are at this point in time, probably the best offensive team that we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, in relation to not necessarily their individual talent, which is high. I give you that. But we've seen some highly talented individual players. But in relation to their ability to get the ball where it needs to go to maximize the skill sets of their players and their players to play within their skill sets. And it's not their defense, it's their offense. It's always, their offense has always been the thing that you have to get into. I watched the first half of this game before I turned over to Manchester and Newcastle, because it was done basically at half time. And it actually is, again, is a bit of a bit self-aggrandizing, but it took me back to our clean sweep team of 14-15. Just the way that, every possession, they were valuing, every possession was going to somebody who knew what they were doing, who was getting the basketball where it needed to go to. And I was looking at Mark Loving and I was thinking, wow, that's Scott Martin. And I was looking at Zach Jackson and thinking Andre Jones and those guys, and obviously it just their rotations are there. They had Mackenzie coming off the bench. That's what Lasker did for us all those years ago, and just everything just seems to be absolutely smooth to the point now whereby they are far less Crandall centric than they have been probably since he got here.
Yeah,
and that's the evolution of a team. And the evolution of that, and that's why the only way that
Crandall today was 8, 5, 6, and 6.
Yeah, exactly. And I
mean, it's a great line to have 5 or more in 4 different categories, but it's not dominant, is it?
Is that, I mean, it's not dominant. It didn't need to be dominant, and credit to him for kind of stepping back and just letting the other guys do it.
And they have 100 points with nobody scoring 20.
Yeah, and what you have you have to be able to defend Crandall. You have to be able to defend the bigs. That's the 2 things. You cannot let the bigs beat you. You cannot let Gino get them the basketball. You then have to try to make Whelan, Mackenzie, Adekoya, and Jackson beat you off the dribble. Now, they're still going to beat you at times, and you've got to force them the right way. Sheffield hadn't played over Christmas. They're missing, their one kind of athlete who fits in, who's gone back to Poland.
Although interestingly, Philip Brown sent me some stats, and the numbers from when they signed Glasgow, I haven't got them to hand, unfortunately.
Yeah.
From when they signed Glasgow, John Williams' numbers just disappeared, basically.
He disappeared, but his minutes disappeared.
Yeah, his minutes went down as well. Yeah. And he obviously dropped out of the starting lineup as well.
Some guys, some Americans take well to dropping out of the starting lineup, some don't. Some go to Poland. So that's it, and you could see there was a kind of a push me pull you with the coach and with the team there, and the coach has to do what's best for the team.
Yeah.
That's it. If the player doesn't fit and the player's not willing to buy into that, well, off the player goes. But what it meant was they were one body down. But you can't, that Mo Walker's going to get the ball early. And he can't be making layups from 4 feet when he's had 3 dribbles. You know, you have to send bodies out. And you have to game plan for him. You have to do something to throw those guys off a little bit. And you're going to give up something else, and it's going to be tough. But I don't think Sheffield had any prospect of game planning for that team, having not played over Christmas, having the whole New Year thing going on. And I think Leicester have absolutely had a perfect Christmas because they've been in their own gym, they played 2 home games, they played in a warm-up game, they played an intense game, and they're just all flying now because they're in the cup final and the pressure is off them. And it wasn't a surprise to me that they did what they did. I don't think they're 40 points better than Sheffield. But as I said earlier on in the podcast, you know, the Christmas exacerbates that. You know, there was a tweet which went up about a game. I think Sheffield's last greatest loss you put up about, it was losing by 35 to Newcastle, I think, or something like that.
This was Sheffield's biggest home defeat ever. The previous highest was 33 points to Newcastle. Happened twice.
And I think one of those games was a New Year's Day game.
Well, it was 2nd of January, same day.
January game. And I remember that game like it was yesterday because that was again that was Trey Moore.
10 years ago, yeah.
We played game over Christmas, and we were absolutely flying at that point in time. I think it might have been the Mersey Tigers year, and we were absolutely flying. And Sheffield hadn't played over Christmas, and I don't think they had the ability to practice much. And Trey came out and had played about the best first half of basketball I've ever seen. He had like 26 points and 9 assists at halftime. You know, he literally took over the game, and it was a team that was ready to play against a team that was literally getting back into the second part of its season. And utterly, you know, the differences in what had precipitated that game led to the score. So we were not 35 points better than that team, but we beat them by 35. Just like, as I say, in this game, Leicester aren't 40 better than Sheffield. But at the moment, if you don't come with a really good game plan for Leicester, they're going to marginalise you offensively. And because very few teams have a Washburn to guard a Crandall. And the interesting thing about the cup final coming up, and we'll talk about that later on, is that Manchester might be one of the few who've got a chance with Jamal being able to match up with Gino, and then having a big body like Dan Clark to match up with Mo Walker and Nelson Henry. And with Mo Walker, it's not necessarily about, you don't think of Dan Clark, you think of him as a kind of perimeter guy, still because of his skills, but he's a big guy. He's a big body, and he can potentially keep Mo Walker a little bit further away from the basket. So that makes the cup final a little more interesting as well. But no, credit to Leicester.
Back to this game for a second. Yeah. Leicester scored 57 points in the first half. They were 23 points. Sheffield was 6 of 9 from 3 and were 23 points down at halftime. Leicester were 5 of 5 from 3. That is the 9th time this season that Leicester have scored 50-plus points in the first half. They did it 9 times in the entire of last season, which is quite incredible.
And that's why I say, it takes us back to 14-15, because it's exactly the way we were. We were literally rolling. There were games that we'd have 50, 55, 60. We'd bring Charles Smith off the bench, and he would go off against the opposition bench, and it breeds the offensive fluency. It breeds almost a sense of invincibility about you. And that's why the second half of the London game was so interesting, was because it was the first time that we've seen a little crack in that invincibility, because they struggled to score. Otherwise, they're on the way.
You obviously switched off at halftime. I had to watch on because there were potential 4 records going on.
All right. Okay.
The question was whether it was going to be Sheffield's biggest ever defeat. It wasn't. That still stands at 40 against the Eagles in the playoffs in 2015, and Mike Tuck was actually scoring, so there was a chance he could have become their all-time leading scorer, but that wasn't the game to
No, I don't think you want me celebrating. I mean, I did smile when I saw that. The Sheffield put a tweet out with Jordan Routino MVP with a couple of cups next to him. Part of me did wanted to point out that he
was only minus 30, to be fair.
That wasn't the game to be celebrating MVP, because if I'd been in Sheffield,
that was actually his 5 of 7 threes, his second best score in the BBL, 21 points. Give him some credit. Leicester, as I say, another one with just a bunch of guys doing stuff. Interestingly, Walker and Nelson Henry, 15 of 22 combined for 33 points.
And they probably made them from a total of about 19 feet.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
And the other interesting stat, and again, I chat, I think it was Philip Brown who sent me this. Points in the paint, 56-18,
There you go.
38 points.
There you go.
The 3-point shooting was exactly the same. It was 9. They were both 9 of 18 from 3. They lost by 38 and lost by 38 in the paint. Let's go on to the final game of the weekend. Manchester Giants 88, Newcastle Eagles 82. Saunders and Hudson were back for the Giants. Sayers was out for the Eagles. So Person was in the starting lineup, although he wasn't there for very long. A couple of early fouls, and he came out of the game. But Eagles with 10 unanswered points and led by 14 points to 5 early on.
I thought Eagles' demeanour at the early part of this game was night and day to what it was in the last game. There were a lot more activity. They looked like athletes, as you know. They looked like they were getting up and down. They looked motivated. They looked ready to play. And defensively, they were pretty solid. I thought Peel was very solid. Manchester missed a few shots, but also Newcastle made some hustle plays. Fletcher was distributing the basketball all around. But they're running with a shorter bench, and ultimately they didn't quite have enough in this game. Person's 2 fouls hurt them early, big time. And again, he sat down for a long, long time before he came back. And he ended up, I think, this game with 20 points in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you'd prefer to have him play 30 minutes. So you've kind of taken him out of the game there for a long time in the first and the second quarter, just to kind of get through the game without him. That puts a lot of stress on some of the other guys. So Johnson has to play a lot of minutes. Williams has to play probably more minutes than they would prefer. And obviously Fletcher has to play significant minutes. Shout out for Yabante, who managed to play in 2 games today and lose them both, which is harsh. But he played for the Newcastle University team in the trophy at Sheffield at 12, and for the Eagles in Manchester at 5. Did actually all right. He only played 3 or 4 minutes, did all right. Manchester, again, they're not quite they're playing differently because they have to, because they're starting Artisan. It's simple as that. It's not a difference in what the coach is saying. It's just the stylistic difference in relation to the amount of space there is on the court and the ability of those guys to get to the rim. You know, Steele and Whelan and Armstrong are slashers. Basically, they're slashers. They want to get to the rim. And McKnight was the same. He was a scorer, but he was also a slasher. The space isn't there as much. There's not as much space with Artisan and Clark. And Artisan was over 5 the first time I looked at the stats in this game. So he's kind of on an up and down kind of offensive player. But they do give them that little bit more defensive solidity. It's not that you can't play with them, it just changes the way that they play. And the game was kind of up and down, but both teams almost feeling each other out for a long period of time in this game. Newcastle, Johnson missed some shots, but it was his first game back from COVID. So, you know, or from a COVID-related absence anyway. I don't know if he's had it or not. And Manchester, you know, took a page out of everybody else's playbook and denied Fletcher whenever they could, and made him, you know, work. And he's having to play 37 minutes, and you know, and basically make a lot of plays for his team. But other than that, not much to say about the first 3 quarters, really.
No, there isn't really. If we spin it forward to the 4th, Whelan and Saunders hit some threes early on, and 78-68.
Yeah, Saunders
Here
made a
comes
difference
my
in this
theory
game.
again about Manchester.
Yeah, absolutely. Saunders made a difference in this game. He made some shots, and he is a difference maker for them. You know, obviously we had him for 6 games. He wasn't really healthy when he was with us. But you know, he's a guy who's got a good resume. He's been around, and he knows his role. He knows his skill set. He knows what he's meant to do. He's a smart basketball player, you know. And I think Laurie likes having him come off the bench and to give them that pop off the bench. And he was impactful in this game. Hudson was impactful in this game because he just basically did everything he could on either side of the line, both legal and illegal, to deny Fletcher the ball. You know, and that's fair enough. That's what he's meant to do. His job for his team is to do exactly that. I would like to see Newcastle just clear out and let Fletcher just go at him, to be honest, and just say, but you know, it's easier to defend somebody if you chase them off screens and you're able to kind of lean in and that type. So it's a lot harder when you're on an island at the top of the key on your own and there's nobody there to help you. But again, obviously that becomes kind of it becomes a very one-dimensional offense if you do that. So their bench really helped them a little bit. Newcastle's bench not so much so. They've got kind of a 3-man, 2 out of 3 thing going on with Shelton and Peel and Defoe, and you don't really know that the kind of the spacing is different with each of the different combinations. So you haven't quite figured that out yet, I don't think. And Johnson and Fletcher got tired towards the end of this game. But yeah, basically Manchester went out 10-up, and then through Newcastle the ball 3 times.
Yeah, And Peel ran back, and suddenly it's a 4-point game.
4-point game, and you think, and to be fair, credit to Newcastle at this point, because they could have just, they could have at that point they could have just said, look, we got 7 players or whatever, and we're tired and we're hurt and we're losing, and we're not going to, this game's done as well. And they didn't, and they stayed in it right to the end. But I thought at the end the execution of Manchester was better than the execution of Newcastle, and ultimately, that's what all these games, that's what any close games, there's going to be a lot of close games in our league come down to.
I thought the 2 big plays for me were the 2 offensive rebounds. The first one from Saunders off a steal miss, and he then makes 2 free throws and turns it from a 3-point game into a 5-point game with 1:22 to go. And then Saunders missed, and Clark got an offensive rebound and dunked it in with 30 seconds to go, and again pushed it from a 3-point game to a 5-point game.
Yeah, I agree. But I was probably a little bit more concerned that Newcastle didn't really get that much that was good at the other end either. It wasn't like they kind of blew a bunny or 2, and their offensive execution against Cheshire obviously was a problem at the end. I already talked at length about that. If anybody wants to go back and listen to that, I don't imagine you do. But it's offensive, but against Cheshire wasn't very good. And then I don't think their offensive execution at the end against Manchester was great either. But then again, Fletcher's playing 37 minutes, and it's hard to and he's not playing an easy 37 minutes. He's playing 37 minutes whereby they're chasing him around. He was 4-14 in this game, and and he's the guy you probably want to be shooting some of the shots at the end, and his legs weren't there. Johnson played 33-34 minutes, and he sat down for a while. I thought Pearson was underused. Pearson played well, 20 points in 20 minutes. He looked like he was
18, 5 of 10 shooting.
Sorry, 18 points in 20 minutes. He just looked like he was up for the basketball game, and he looked like he was a threat on the basketball court. Sorry, I'm beginning to sound like a football manager who says football. Every sentence, sorry. And but ultimately, just didn't have enough. So they're now 4 and 6. Got to go back to the drawing board. They're kind of in and around Cheshire and hoping that Surrey don't make a run, I think.
So Clark, we'll get into that in a sec. Clark 19 and 11, Saunders 16 and 8, Armstrong 16, Anderson 11, Johnson 15 and 7, Defoe 14. The table is a bit weird at the minute because there's so many different. I mean, it often is a bit weird.
I'm sure you'll give us 5 different versions of it.
Yeah, three. I always send out 3 versions just for clarity's sake. But if interestingly, I printed out the official version, but I'm going to read it out as I see it in my head. So Leicester in first place with 8 wins and no defeats. The teams with 2 losses are Bristol, 4 wins and 2 losses, and London 3 wins and 2 losses. Wow. They're currently 4th and 7th. The teams with 3 defeats are Manchester 7 and 3, Sheffield 5 and 3, Glasgow 4 and 3. So my sense is nobody behind that has any chance of catching Leicester. Is there
half the teams you just mentioned have no chance of catching?
So is there anybody in that? I was about to ask you, is there anybody in that? Bristol with 2 defeats, London with 2 defeats, Manchester 3, Sheffield 3, and Glasgow 3. Any of them you think?
No. London. Maybe. London, I think Manchester have a player to come if they bring a new player. I don't think Manchester are going to be consistent enough to be able. They're just too young in their
evolution.
Their evolution at this point to be competing. Their 3 losses down, and it's a focus thing, because this is the thing about in Newcastle. You're at the front, when we were at Newcastle, you always want to put as many teams away as you can, as early as you can. So if you win the head-to-head on teams early, or if a team's got 3 losses early and you've got none or 1, or 4 losses and you've got none or 1. That team isn't going to have the same focus on absolutely desperately winning every game, as you are. And so that's what Leicester are doing at the moment. They're basically putting teams in their place one by one. Now, the team that Leicester haven't played, obviously the thing is Leicester haven't played Manchester three times in the league, and they haven't played London 3 times in the league. So that's 6 games, which are going to be quite significant in the determination of who wins the league. Out of it, as I say, I don't see anybody else getting close. Glasgow potentially, but Glasgow Arsenal have lost their American power forward and they never replaced the first one, I don't think, anyway. And they're a little bit, their problems on the road are, to use another horrible football phrase, well documented.
Indeed.
So I don't say that. And Sheffield, no. I mean, you don't win a league when they've lost 2 home games to Leicester already. So they're 4 games down already. And I'm afraid they don't have the roster to go on a run. The only team who has the roster to go on a run is London. But London went on that run last year. They won 11 in a row, but they threw away too many games early to be able to do it. But what it means is that, if I was Leicester, I'd want to get as many wins as I can before I had to play either London or Manchester. Yeah. You want to separate yourself as far as you can.
I know they play, I don't know when the London game is off the top of my head, because I think one of them got moved. But I know they play Manchester on TV. I think it's the week after the cup final. It might be 2 weeks after the cup final.
Right, that'll be interesting.
In Manchester as well.
I mean, I'm saying Manchester. Manchester are, I'm talking 100 to 1. I'm not suggesting that there's any. I don't think they have a realistic prospect of winning the league. I think they're too young in their evolution. I do, but
they've got good players. They've got good players.
Yeah, but it's not just that. They don't have that many players with BBL winning experience.
Winning a league. Winning a league is a bit different.
Experience. They've got. I mean, and I appreciate Dan Clark's experience. Will Dan Clark hold up the whole season, maybe? But you look at the Artisan, Armstrong, Steele, Whelan, Saunders, all those stuff. You can see that. You could see them dropping some games, and I think they'll have a very good season. I think they're probably a 19 and 8, 20 and 17 potentially. But you're not going to win the league 20 and 7. But London realistically with their group, whatever, if they make any changes, whatever, they could, if they lock in, they can realistically win 15 games in a row.
Yeah.
As it was last year. And that's the only thing, and we know Leicester can win 15 games in a row, but nobody else can. So yeah, I know your job is to try and make stuff exciting. And
No. I'm just curious to your view on that. And then I'm going beyond that, and I'm slightly hesitant because I've just clocked that when I do the buy losses table, Newcastle are going to be out of the playoff places on that.
They are. Sadly,
Scorchers,
never denied the reality in my life.
Five defeats, although only 1 win. And Newcastle have 6 defeats with four wins as well, and then Plymouth 0-8, and that's going to look weird when I run the table, and they're not going to be.
Well, it might do, but sport is a great leveler. Sport is meritocracy, etc.
But of those 3 teams, you would expect Newcastle at some point to come to.
Well,
the other thing with Surrey is, and to be to some extent with Plymouth, Surrey I can't remember if they were ever fully fit, were they? I don't think they ever were.
No.
At some point they will. They probably won't have everything that they did have, because obviously Lawrence and the other fellow who played at Worcester, whose name's gone out of my head now, Gilchrist aren't there anymore. Yeah. And Plymouth have some pieces there, and obviously Williams, for what it's worth, did seem to do really well in the game I didn't watch.
Yeah, he looked like he's a player. Yeah, but it's like everything. BBL teams the good teams with good players will eventually win some games. Now there's kind of 5 different characteristics of a team. There's a team which is unbeatable. That's kind of a sweep team, and they happen once every 5, 6, 10 years. There's kind of a team that's pretty darn solid. I think that's probably where Manchester are at this point. There's then your 500 team, so your team that's bouncing around, that's going to win 1, lose 1, that type of stuff. I would probably put Bristol at that at the moment. They're 4 and 2, so maybe they're a bit better than that, but we'll need to play a few more games to see. Then you have your kind of scraping into the playoffs type team, and at the moment that is Cheshire and Newcastle. And then you have your, and maybe Surrey, and then you have your team which isn't going to win a game, which we've seen before with like teams like Leeds and Durham, etc. And at the moment, that's Plymouth, but I think that will change. So they're five different types of teams. Now you've only got a 10-team league, so there's only two in each category. The key for each of those teams is to kind of lever themselves up into the next category, apart from Leicester, who are already there, and London to decide what they want to be. Which category do they want to be? Do they want to be the team that turns up for the playoffs and cruises through the regular season and doesn't bother trying to win the league? Or are they going to utterly focus on every single game with the single-mindedness that you need to win the league? It's why I always like to win the league. When you're involved, it is by far there is the least randomness in the league than there is in anything else. So I always thought that was the biggest achievement. And players don't necessarily set that because they want to see who turns up and who plays best when the lights are on in the really big game. That's kind of always how you separate yourself as a player. But as a kind of a administrator, GM, whatever, assistant coach, whatever, what satisfied you the most was planning through a whole season and having a focus day in, day out.
There's also that thing of you've got to be able to, stuff comes up. So, like Leicester last year, Gino breaks his hand and they have to find a way of squeezing games out down the stretch, and those sorts of things come along, and you've got
always moments. I could tell you, I could point, we won a league 2013-14 with a wedgie on the buzzer at Manchester. We won 12 games in a row, and the seventh game was a game at Manchester, the old Wright Robinson School, and we're up by a point, and James Jones chucks one from 30 feet, and it sticks between the basket and the backboard with no time on the clock. Now, if his trajectory on that shot is an inch higher, then we lose. We don't win the league. We're still winning the league, And the small, but grinding that stuff out. It's why ultimately the basketball karma kicks in. You get what you put in. You get what you do. If it's not right, if it's not very right, if everybody's not right, you're not going to win. That's kind of the one thing that Flanoy taught us. It has to be all right, and once it's all right and you're pointing in the right direction, sky's the limit. And that's where Leicester are at the moment. And so we'll see.
We will see indeed, but we will call it a night for now. Dave and I will be back next Sunday night to do it all again. Have a great week, and we will see you then. Goodbye.